Hi guys, welcome to Digital Creative Designs. I'm Gilbert. I'm gonna take you through a typical editing style that I adopt when I approach a portrait photo. Now I usually start off with Lightroom. I've got a pre-selection of portraits. And what I do is I would choose one. For instance, let me start with number 27 over here. This is the full portrait as was shot on the day of acquiring this photo. It was a pageant and I used studio lights. So I would usually look at the clarity and also the sharpness of the picture. I'm looking at the lighting, and then if it's even and well lit and I'm happy, then I'll make my selection. I'll start with a primary adjustment, looking at the exposure, looking at highlights. So in this particular image it's not that bad, but I can make it pop a little and get rid of the shadows in the picture. It's got a few highlights, but it's not dominant. I can live with it as long as it's not overpowering the overall look and overpowering the shadows. So then in that case I'll bring down the highlights slightly. I'll also bump up the shadows, okay, just to make it stand out a bit. And also my style is a little bit contrasting, so I like to use contrast in my images because I just feel it, it makes for a good picture that stands out, because usually people's eyes are drawn to light and images that's more contrasty, and that's just how we register it in our brains. Because I've selected the few images, and these images are extreme close-ups where you can literally see the texture on their faces, I would use this one as one of the extreme close-ups, because it's got a lot of color definition and depth in it. And if I need to compare it with this one, so what I've done, I've just punched into the image. As you can see, this is full body. That's when I've punched into it, just to make it also consistent with the rest of the portraits I've done. So if I can just show you just briefly some of the edits I've done with the overlays. So this is where I want to get it, starting from here. So I will select my image and then create a virtual image. Okay, so it's easy. You just right click on that image and you go to create virtual copy. So it creates a virtual, so you can preserve the previous copy if you need to go back to the edit. So this is the one I've punched in. Okay, so I've made my primary adjustments there, looking at the color balance, the temperature, what have you. I can also go down and put a little bit more of detail in. Oh, I've done it already. So okay, so it's a very well lit image, so I'll select this one, and to go to Photoshop you select Ctrl E, and this image will then be imported to Photoshop. So if I go to Photoshop, there's my image. Okay, so I usually, what I do, the first thing I do, I would duplicate my layer, and then I would start off cleaning up some of the pimples, maybe slight scratches on the face and imperfections. So that's what I'll start with. So I'll create then a second layer, and I'll use that layer in conjunction with my healing brush tool. And this is the spot healing brush. Select my spot healing brush. I go for something a little bit softer, a lot more softer. So I'm using the right click method where I'm still using a mouse at this stage. I'm not on a Wacom tablet or any tablet yet. But yeah, I'll basically get the same results. I do own a Wacom tablet, but it's virtually new, but I haven't developed the dexterity to work with it yet. But I will transition over to it. Okay, enough about that. Okay, that's my healing brush. So I can start off by removing some of the pimples like this. Okay, and when I do this, I usually choose areas where I look at how the imperfection flow. If it's in a specific direction, then I do it with the grain, so to speak, or in that same direction. Okay, because what it does, it samples the skin texture and color around the imperfection, and that's where I then proceed. And wherever there is larger imperfections, because with frequency separation we will get rid of all the blemishes, I would just get rid of those imperfections that is more obvious. Alright, now look at this spot over here. Now for that I can go and use the patch tool, where I just make a circle around it and sample an area that is either close to it. Let's see how that one will work. You know why? Because we started to remove the layer on top, and then I do the patch, and then I invoke the patch tool. In that way, if I go back and I activate the top layer, I can then add a layer mask and get rid of the area which is on top of the edit I've done at the bottom. So to get rid of that, I'll then just go to my brush tool, and then I can remove that on the top layer using the black color, because black conceals and white reveals. So I'm going to conceal that edit I've made on top. Okay, alright, so it doesn't look like 100% how I wanted it, but at least it's a start, and it gets rid of the huge patch she had there on her face. So I can go back again to the patch tool, and I can try and sample another area. Let's see how that one works much better. Okay, because it flows with that highlight. Maybe a little bit more from here, and then yes, that one works well. Okay, then I can continue to, while I've accidentally hit save, I can continue to go to my spot healing brush, and I can start fixing the rest of the imperfections. Okay, so when you get here, you have to be not really concise, but very patient, and make sure that you don't damage the skin or the textures too much. Otherwise it will defeat the purpose using frequency separation. Okay, so I think I got rid of the pimples and imperfections, so I'll go on to see what I'd like to do if I'm happy with an image like this. for I know I don't need to come back to my where I fixed all the spots and the pimples and the imperfections. So I can just go ahead and then merge that layer, and then I can then select my beauty retouch panel, and I will use frequency separation. Okay, you can do it manually, but the retouch panel just puts you halfway there where you don't have to go and create your it's basically just a set of actions that you can create yourself. So let me invoke that, and it now generates the necessary levels and layers. This layer here, the Gaussian blur, is for you to just select the layer to a point where it hides the blemishes and it creates a smooth transition between the colors on the skin, and where it literally hides all the patches and the blotches on the skin. So I think I'm gonna go with a, let me make it 11 pixels. So that one is selected. Okay, so then I would then from here select my mixing brush tool. I would then look at the settings of the mixing brush tool. The width 33 is fine, load is fine. So load is a little bit high for me, so maybe I should reduce that to 35. And then mixing 32, flow 34. Okay, that's fine. So then I will then go to the, it says correcting tones. So you deselect the high frequency texture layer just above that to get you to the sort of blurry overlay. Now the trick here is to make sure that you don't have hard edges. So select the soft brush, okay, and study the image. Look at how you will even out the colors and how one color transition into other colors. Also bear in mind your shadows versus your highlight areas. So for instance, if I start here, there's so almost like a hard edge between light and dark. So with the mixing brush, you press Alt on Windows, and then you start just preparing that hard edge. You can either move your strokes away, sample from the middle, and you push it away from your point of interest, if I may call it that way. And then once you're happy, you can then just even it out and smooth it out so that the transition on the skin and between the different colors are even. So this is quite a tedious process, but look, it's all for a good purpose, and at the end you'll have a flawless image. Get rid of all these strong edges over here. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Alright, so now we're moving over to the next phase of our edit. That's where we're gonna deal with the imperfections of the textures on the skin. As you can see, some areas has got a lot of humps compared to smoother areas like this. So the trick here is to make sure that we even out some of the textures while preserving it at the same time. So for that, I'm going to use the clone stem tool. I keep my opacity at 75, and like with the mixing brush, I also sample an area of texture, and then from there, okay, let me just give it a softer edge, and then from there I would then, okay, I choose a sample with the Alt tool, and then I go to the texture. Now I usually do one take of texture retouch if I feel it's too much, and then I just lower the opacity because I want to retain some of that texture while I'm working on it. Let me just do that. Yeah, I think that's fine, because once a texture is overdone, it's not always that you can retrieve or go back to its previous stage. So just make sure then that you sample from the correct area and that you still retain the texture. That's once the color has been fixed, you can then just go ahead and fix the textures. Well, somehow I noticed that the clone stem tool on the high frequency layer also get rid of some, I think maybe it's the way the light falls on that area or pixels, where you will literally see that the high frequencies are slightly changing the color on the skin. Okay, I think I'm happy with it. Okay, just zoom out. Oh, that's much better. It looks much more natural. The textures are retained, and maybe I can punch more into the face. So reason why I'm going back is that I still need to crop this image because I'm looking at the composition of the rest of the portrait. So alright, that's a jumbo size, 5x7. So once I click on the crop tool on the image, it will then allow me to scale it, resize it, crop it in the correct proportions as compared to the rest of my portraits. So I bear in mind my rule of thirds. I think, oh, that's nice. I think I'll settle for that, because cropping in some instance is a destructive edit in Photoshop, depending on what actions follows after cropping. And if I want to come back to it, I will create a smart object. So this folder contains all the edits I've done under frequency separation, but if I want to include, I won't include the background layer, so I'll just do the frequency separation folder or layer group, and then I'll convert that to a smart object, because then I'll be able to get back to it later. So I'm happy with that edit. So usually now what I do here is my dodging and burning phase. So with dodging and burning, I will then select my curves adjustment layer. I'll then start with burning. Just reduce the exposure slightly, and then I'll call that brooding. Okay, and then invert the layer for now, and I create another layer under curves, and this one I will call dodging. I would just bump it up slightly so that you see that the highlights on the face are more pronounced. And then that's not where I stop. My next phase of dodging, which is the style layer. So I just click on the blank area next to the style layer, and then I use my blending options. Now I go to the underlying layer, and you can see there's a gradient here from dark to light. So I want to affect the highlights of the face. So I'll then push this adjustment towards the lighter area. Focuses on the light areas on the skin, on the face. If I move it, you can see there. So if I want my highlights to just affect this part until my chin is highlighted, then I'm happy. But now what it did is that you can see there's some harsh edges between the dark and the light area. So to make the transition between light and dark more even and smoother, we feather it. So to feather it, this adjustment button can then be split into two by using your Alt key and click on it, and then if you separate the two, you will then notice a more gradual transition from light to dark and vice versa. So for now I'll leave it like that, and then I will then invert the mask so that I can paint in the effect. So let me go to the burning layer. I'll then reveal that one. Again, same process. I'll reveal my layer style by double clicking on the blank area on the layer, and then I'll do the inverse. I'll then start from the light area, move my adjustment to a darker spot, and then I'll see also which area of burning I want to affect. Okay, I think I'm happy there, and then I'll also then split it by clicking Alt and make that transition more gradual. So what this does, it not only creates the dodging and burning effect, but it also puts some shine to the face. And we can always dial it in if it's too pronounced by using our opacity slider. So I'm also gonna hide this effect because I only want to affect the face in certain parts. So I'm gonna now select my normal brush tool, a soft brush, and I'm gonna start with the highlight areas, and I'm gonna paint that effect in. Okay, let me adjust my flow to 66, and I'll leave my opacity on 100 because I can always dial it down. I'll then select my color to white, and then I'll paint in the highlights. There you go. I'm happy with that, and maybe highlights here, and maybe on the some on the chin, maybe that part, and then on the nose, side of the nose, more on the bridge, maybe in the eye, and maybe in that eye as well. So if you feel that that effect is too pronounced, you can always go back, and that's the beauty of it. I can then go and adjust only the parts that I've affected by the highlight effect. And then the same now will go for the burning. So burning is the dark areas. I can then go and make the changes in the darker areas. It's usually on the edges. Accentuate the highlighted areas. Okay, if you made a mistake, you can just go to black again, and it will then conceal. If you feel it's too dark, I can then go back and remove the darkness from the ridge. Okay, and then I can then just dial in the dark areas. See there? Now that is where I've put more volume to the face. Okay, so I'm happy with that result. And then I usually then go to Selective Color to choose my colors, and maybe I'm going for something more stylistic or more natural to taste. The selective tool is usually where I get a very good result. The opposite of red is cyan. The opposite of magenta is blue. The opposite of yellow is green, and so on. So yeah, just bear it in mind. That's a bit pinkish. Going for something more yellowish. Yep, I'm happy with that result. So once I'm happy with that, I can then go and create a second group by clicking Ctrl G, and I will call that my colors. I will then work on my background. Now for Facebook promotions, I like to use a solid white, not a subdued beigey sort of bluish tone. I go for pure white. So I would then, if I do this, I usually use the select subject function to select my subject and separate the subject from my background. But in this case, I cannot do that with a smart layer. So what I'll do, I'll work on a rasterized copy. So I would go Ctrl E to create a copy of everything in the on the bottom, and then I'm able to select my subject. So click on my subject, and it will create an outline of the selected area, and it uses Adobe Sensei to select the subject. Now it has done a very good job, except for this area over here. Now it's easy to remove that. I can just go to my polygonal lasso tool, and I can make that part of that selection by adding to the selection. You press the shift button to add to your selection. Now I have to look at it from a different background in order to establish how the selection around the face, around the hair looks. And for that, I'll go to the select and mask function. Now to look at black hair, I always use the red background to look at the selection to see if it's quite clean. If not, I'll just click on refine hair just to see what it does. That's also using Adobe Sensei. So I didn't get a good result. I'll just deselect, and then I'll use this tool over here to select my outline around the hair. Just decrease my selection and see how that will pan out. So this will basically just select outline and make sure that we're not missing some fine hairs that should be part of our selection. Okay, great stuff. Now I'll go back and I'm selecting it to go to a new layer. Click, and there's my mask, so you won't see any difference until I've created a background by creating a new layer and just using the default white color, and then my paint bucket tool to paint over it. Make sure that it is pure white. Okay, that's awesome. So usually as I do this, I would then go to levels and just make a few more fine adjustments just to make my model pop. Skin color in the edit, and then if I'm happy with that, I can go in do my overlays. So I can then take my model and then bring that up a bit. That's my final edit. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more. And yes, see you again in my next video.